On behalf of the McNiel family, I'd like to thank everyone for coming. This is a day that comes with much sorrow, but also with joyful memories of a life well lived. Every one of us has a story. How many know that we all have a story? We all have a story, and I'll tell you what, preparing for this service, we learned that Thomas loved stories, right? He loved poems, and he loved pictures, and he loved to tell a story, and he loved to create the character, right? The character of the story, the star of the story. And so stories were important to Thomas McNiel, and we are here to honor his story. I heard stories all week. I heard stories about how much he loved his kids, and how much he loved his wife, and how much he loved his grandkids, and how much he loved his family. How many know family was a very important thing to Tom? The get-togethers and the gatherings were very, very important. A man who loved his family. Today is an opportunity for his family to express their love for Tom. And as I listened to these stories, I saw his family laugh and smile. How many know that even on a sad week, when you see a family who laughs and smiles and enjoys the telling of the stories, that's a symbol of a happy family, of a healthy family that loved each other, and that story is important. Treasured moments. Thank you again for coming and remembering with us. Tom's story has concluded, but his legacy continues in us. His story closed, but how many know parts of him? We heard even today things that people are cherishing, even now, and they're like, hey, this affected my life. I'm here today because of how his story affected my story. So how many know that his story lives on in us? And so we need to remember that. We need to remember that as we go out today. We will remember him when we view a slideshow. How many have ever seen one of Tom's slideshows? We'll remember him when we hear a poem. How many have heard one of Grandpa Tom's poems, right? And then how many will remember when you hear a funny story? Those are all things that will trigger memories for us as we continue to live our life. When we hear that simple story, that poem, or see that slideshow, something will be brought back to our remembrance so that we can remember Tom. All of these ordinary activities will remind us of his part of our story. It is my hope that Tom's life inspires us to live our life to the fullest. I would like to encourage you with a verse from the Bible and a prayer of comfort for all of you, his family and friends, those present and those who are unable to come today. And I chose 2 Thessalonians 2:16 and 17, and it says this: Now may our Lord Jesus Christ himself and God our Father, who loved us and by his grace gave us eternal comfort and a wonderful hope, comfort you and strengthen you in every good thing you do and say. And would you be willing to bow your heads in prayer as I pray? Dear Lord, we just take a moment. We take a moment and we ask you, would you please comfort our hearts? Lord, I pray that you would be with each one of the family and with his friends. And we just pray that you would just help us to sense your presence. Lord, we want to give you glory. We want to give you honor in everything that we do. And Lord, we're so thankful for a life well lived. And we pray that you would just help that be inspiration, that it would challenge us on how we live our lives. And Lord, comfort us today. Be with us. We thank you for your many blessings. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Ben. Uncle Ben's going to come. This is my eulogy for my dad. He was a giant. Oh, he wasn't king of a great nation. He wasn't president of the United States. He was not a famous or even infamous politician. He was not a Hollywood actor.
although he would have relished that role. He was and is part of what is now called the greatest generation. 100 years ago, his father and grandfather cleared 320 acres of forest 9 miles south of Iron River, Wisconsin, and built a farm, raising cattle and buckwheat. Born July 13, 1922, Dad was the fourth child of Miles and Inez McNiel. He would eventually have 4 brothers and 4 sisters. He loved to tell stories about growing up there. With none of today's distractions, they had to entertain themselves. One day, their older sister, Joyce, was sitting in the kitchen getting her hair fixed. Dad and his brothers, Dick and Terry, took the lead wires from a hand crank generator near the house into the kitchen, and while 1 or 2 distracted their mom and Joyce, someone slipped the wires between the chair seat and Joyce's bottom. They went back out to the generator, gave it a good crank. Screams came from the kitchen as Joyce flew through the screen door without opening it. All these years later, he would still laugh when telling that story. He liked to tell of seeing his first automobile, a Model T, come driving down the dirt road in front of the farm. He stood amazed watching it until it went out of sight over a hill. And seeing his first airplane, actually a formation of biplanes, flying over the farm. He was mesmerized by them as they flew out of sight. An aircraft would hold his attention for the rest of his life. In 1937, his father sold the farm to Henry Ford. Miles bought a 1930 7-passenger Cadillac from the widow of a lumber baron and built a 4-wheel trailer to pull behind it. Loading all their possessions into the trailer and 9 children into the caddy, they took off for California. Miles and his brother Ray built homes next to each other in Rosemead and lived in them for the rest of their lives. As World War II broke out, Dad and his brother Dick went to enlist. Dick was accepted into the Navy, but Dad, who wanted to be a pilot, was rejected because of sinus problems. So he did the next best thing he could, went to work at Lockheed Aircraft, building P-38 Lightning fighter aircraft. There he met a young, attractive woman from Missouri, who also worked on the P-38s as a welder. In August 1945, he married Dorothy Eileen Osborne. A little over a year later, pilot. With the war effort ending, jobs became scarce in California, and Mom's stepfather suggested they move to Springfield where Dad could get a job in a furniture factory. They did. And a short while later, Dad heard Boeing in Wichita, Kansas was hiring, and we moved there. As Dad waited for his first paychecks, we stayed in a leaky fishing cabin on a creek. In 1949, they bought a new 2-bedroom, 1-bath home on Elder Street in Wichita. That's where we lived as Anita, Dennis, and Sandra were born, and where I grew up. Dad was a hard worker. He would work outdoors on aircraft in Kansas blizzards and sweltering summer heat. Other than field trips for Boeing, he always came home every night. I never saw him intoxicated. Mom would not have tolerated that, and he honored her wishes. In 1965, Dad accepted a transfer by Boeing to relocate to Kent, Washington. He was excited to work on the first moon boat, combining his interest in automobiles, aircraft mechanics, and space travel. He would continue to work for Boeing until his retirement. A few years later, in 1989, Mom passed away from cancer. Dad never remarried. Now I could tell you many, many more stories about my dad, but I do want to share this one. He and I started work on the McNiel genealogy in the 1970s and worked together until recently. As we entered the 21st century, he mentioned a few times how he would like to go back and see the places he lived, visit old friends and relatives he grew up with, and meet distant relatives we had found in Michigan through our genealogical research. I began plotting, planning, and contacting people. I found some of the children he grew up with and planned meetings. He knew nothing of what I was doing. And then in June of 2004, I told him some of what we were going to do. Just he and I took off on our road adventure through Colorado, into Wichita to meet with our old neighbors, and to tour inside the house on Elder Street, over to Miami, Oklahoma to visit with my son, his oldest grandson, Darren, and great-granddaughter, Kate, on to Springfield, Missouri, to visit some of Mom's relatives. Then up to Iowa to visit the widow of his brother, Terry, and their adult children, my cousins. Onward I drove into Michigan. We met descendants of our shared ancestors from 150 years earlier. They showed us the old McNiel homestead, built by my dad's great-grandfather, whom he never knew. We visited the cemeteries where generations of McNeils are buried, about whom we knew nothing before we began our research. The families that showed us around were great. I wish we could have spent a month there, but I had a schedule to keep and people to surprise Dad with. We drove on to Iron River, Wisconsin. This was his old stomping grounds where he grew up. He found the land that had been a farm. The buildings were gone. The land was now forest again. I could hear the catch in his voice as we talked about the hard work his dad and mom and he and his siblings had put in to build the farm. All was gone. We found the foundation of the McNiel School, the one-room building. That grades 1 through 12 were taught to the McNiel kids and neighboring children. I found one of them, Claire Bottom, and surprised Dad as we went to her home and were welcomed in to visit. Oh, the stories that came out of them. On to visit his cousin Wally Skirbeck and childhood friend Margie Kessler, who had the keys to the Iron River Historical Museum and opened it for us on Sunday. Dad really did walk down memory lane that day as he shared stories, laughter, and a few tears. And as we left Iron River and headed home, he complimented me on a job well done. One of the few times he ever did. I drove all 6,658 miles and heard every story he has and heard every joke at least 3 times. But I'm glad I did it. He loved reading, writing poetry, and astronomy. Could name all the constellations. I know he is now on a grand adventure among the stars of heaven, experiencing things that the rest of us can't only imagine. I would like to end this eulogy where I began. My earliest memory of my life was confirmed by Mom and Dad when I told them about it in the 1980s. It was near the leaky fishing shack they lived in when we moved to Wichita. The creek ran along a large sand quarry and stretched across the quarry, and the creek was what today is called a zip line. I was going on 3 years old, and Dad had taken me to the top of the zip line. We sat in whatever contraption was there, and he held me on his lap. Off we went across the sand piles and across the creek to the bottom. That was probably my first adrenaline rush. Getting off, he placed me on my feet, and we started walking back to the shack. As we walked on the sand, I looked straight ahead at the back of his knees. Then down at his footprints in the sand, as I tried to keep pace with his stride, tried to follow in his footsteps. Then I looked up at his silhouette in the morning sun. He was a giant of a man. He was my father. Bon voyage to heaven.
These are my thoughts about my father. Thomas, or Ben, as my mom called him, was a man of many words until it came to terms of endearment. He preferred to show his affection through action rather than words. I called him a family man. He provided for his 4 children by working hard, many times overtime hours, raised rabbits for food, and grew vegetables for our table. So even when Boeing had layoffs and strikes, he was able to provide food and shelter. The one thing you could always count on, even if Dad had worked a double shift and was dog-tired, was when he first got home, we would run to greet him with a "Daddy's home," and he would take each one of us up in his arms and twirl us around. One of my earliest memories was seeing him slaughter a rabbit. I squealed when I saw him slice off the head and blood squirted everywhere. I ran inside crying to Mom, and she always kept me inside during slaughter time. He would tan the hides and make use of the fur. The boys got fur-covered canteen bottles. Anita got a fur mitt to warm her hands, and Mom made me a rabbit fur coat for my Barbie dolls. And the vegetable garden got lots of fertilizer. We experienced many snow days in Kansas, and Dad built an igloo one year. How many kids can say their dad built them an igloo? He also built a toboggan out of sheet metal. The only problem was where to ride it in the flat plains of Kansas. There was one man-made hill for sledding where he eventually launched it. Dad was always building toys for the boys. He constructed a wood cutout of a gun and glued a clothespin on top where we could position our rubber bands and shoot them like ammo. With Roy Rogers, the rifleman, and Daniel Boone all the rage on TV, we played a lot of cowboys and Indians. Dad built a high jump, stilts, rings, and a chin-up bar for Benny as he grew into a teen. One year he built a go-kart, and Benny was envious because I was the only one light enough to get it to run fast. He didn't know I was scared to death as I raced around the neighbor's racetrack because it had a handbrake, but I didn't have the strength to make it stop. I can't remember if Benny came to the rescue or if it eventually ran out of gas, but I never got on it again. Fast forward to Kent, Washington, and my teenage years. Dad spent most of his spare time in his basement shop, but I remember asking him to go play tennis with me, and he took the time to play with me in the street. He also never missed school events of band and orchestra recitals that Dennis and I were in. Years passed, and I invited Dad to go snow skiing with me one winter. He was about 70 at this time. He always told me the story of him skiing in California and how he just aimed his skis downhill and zoomed down he went. Well, things hadn't changed. Mind you, he was 70 and he had never been on a ski chair lift, only tow ropes. So I was concerned that he would dismount without falling. Well, he got off the ski chair safely, but aimed downhill and zoom, off he went. I couldn't keep up, but could see him whizzing down the hill when suddenly he was near the bottom and he hit a patch of ice-packed snow. His feet sprawled out into a split and his face planted into the ice. I laughed and thought it was funny until I caught up and saw the trail of blood that led from his spill until he stopped. He wasn't moving. I thought, oh my God, I've killed my father. He was knocked out cold and his face was scraped from forehead to chin. We got the ski patrol to take him to the first aid, and he came to. At first thing out of his mouth to the nurse was, "You're so beautiful." I knew he was back to normal. He was always a flirt. The years flew by, and Dad eventually moved from Graham to Olympia, where we could keep a closer eye on him. Paula, Eric, and I took turns checking in on him, but one day he called me at work and said, "I've fallen and I can't get up." I said I would be right there. I called 911 and beat the firemen to the scene. I could not find him in the house, so then I heard a "in here." I followed the noise. He was in his workshop, but the door was locked. Just about then, the fireman showed up and broke down the door. There he was on the cement floor with an anvil on his leg. He had lost his key to the door, so decided to jimmy open the window in the shop and crawl through and unlock the door from the inside. Here he was, 90 years old, crawling through windows. Well, he made it through the window and over the workbench, but before his foot touched the floor, he knocked the anvil off the counter and he fell into the floor. The anvil followed and hit his femur bone, breaking it in two. After surgery, he came to recuperate at our house for 6 months. He spent another few years independently, but finally the doctor said he was getting dementia and was a fall risk, so he needed full-time care. I'll have to admit, he could remember where items were, but stored them in the weirdest places, like the canned vegetables in the file cabinet and his screwdriver and hammer in the silverware drawer. Plus, it was scary to see him drive. Once he was driving Anita and me back to the house. It was dark out, but he barely slowed down in his blue Lincoln and made the turn into my street too soon. I yelled, "No, that's the ditch." He promptly turned the wheel, but we hit the ditch. Anita fell over in the seat screaming, "Are you trying to kill us?" And we popped out of the ditch and he kept driving as if nothing happened. In October of 2016, he came to live with Bob and I permanently. His new PT Cruiser now had several dents in it, not to mention the pole on his carport. Being a caretaker took its toll on us, but there were rewards also. This is when I truly bonded with my dad. He told me old stories of his childhood that I had not heard before. Imagine that. Which made me understand more fully his personality and why he was the way he was. I was glad he opened up to me and became vulnerable. Over the next few years, we enjoyed dining out, movies, taking him to the county fair, attending family events, and just sitting on the back deck reading and enjoying the sunshine. Just last summer, he rode an adult trike around the cul-de-sac and exclaimed, "It feels good to be driving again." One of the things I did for him was I entered some of his poems into the county fair. And the one I'm going to read now is called The Transplantee. He wrote it in '65 when he moved from Wichita to Kansas. And then the next poem, Eric's going to recite. And that one, he won Best of Show and a blue ribbon at the fair, called Sentimental Continental. Okay, the Transplantee. I used to live in Wichita, upon the Kansas plain, where golden wheat bows down before the breeze, where cottontails are buffeted by pelting hail and rain, and rivers almost never fail to freeze. Why the Mississippi Valley has been called Tornado Alley, where hamlets have been beaten to their knees. You can see extravaganzas with movie stars galore, in CinemaScope and Technicolor too. But the greatest show on earth's the kind that nature has in store. And every day reveals to public view, and it doesn't cost a cent to enjoy the firmament when the twinkling stars are staring back at you. I felt the endless prairies where trees are early brown, and from my residence I now can see the Cascades, Olympics, Rainier, and Puget Sound. I never dreamed how lovely it could be, and although it rains a lot, it never gets too hot. I've decided this is just the place for me. We will all miss his adventurous spirit, wit, sense of humor, storytelling, and reciting his poetry. Thank you all for coming. And I'd like to invite Eric up to read the other poem.
All right, hopefully I can do this justice. So, Sentimental Continental. I sell the Alpine chain, sell the China Sea. I steer a square schooner round the Horn. I scan the blue Biscayne, work the mines of Kimberley, and shiver where the northern lights are born. I fought the wild Atlantic and skimmed the Rider Zee. Sahara sands are sharp as Arab swords. I basked in shore romantic like the beach at Waikiki, and probed the lengths of the cold Norwegian fjords. I gazed in silent wonder at the gleaming Taj Mahal, with reverence at Madonna in the Louvre. Been defeated by thunder of a mighty waterfall, or Niagara cuts abroad majestic roof. I stalked the stealthy leopard to the shrinking shores of Chad, and struggled with the tarpons off the Keys. I've been a lonely shepherd and climbed the hills of God, and trod the undulting Pyrenees. The cobblestones of Paris have known my aimless tread. By taxi I have toured the Rue Ronde. I blasted to Polaris in voids of nameless tread, and rocketed to galaxies beyond. But now my tale unravels, never strolled a highland way, nor visited the Vatican in Rome. For my globe encircling travels have with my books been made, on my sectional beneath the lamp at home.
And Kim, we can invite you to come.
Waiting for the background music. I do remember him talking about his time in a barbershop quartet.
In the palm
the pictures tell better stories than us sometimes. And so if you'll turn your attention to the screen, you're going to see a slideshow that's been very well put together. That's going to tell quite a history lesson. And so yeah, please enjoy that.
Oh, Danny boy, the pipes are calling from glen to glen and down the mountainside. The summer's gone and all the roses falling. 'Tis you must go, and I must bide. But come ye back when summer's in the meadow, or when the valley's hushed and white with snow. 'Tis I'll be here in sunshine or in shadow. Oh, Danny boy, I love you so. But when ye come and all the flowers are dying, if I am dead, as dead I well may be, you'll come and find the place where I am lying, and kneel and say an Ave there for me, and I shall hear the soft you tread above me, and all my grave shall warmer, sweeter be. For ye shall bend and tell me that you love me, and I shall sleep in peace until you come to me.
Spend all your time waiting for that second chance, for a break that would make it okay. There's always one reason to feel not good enough, and it's hard at the end of the day and need some distraction. Oh, beautiful release. Memory seeps from my veins. Let me be empty. Oh,
It's my privilege to be a part of the McNiel family. I'm married to McNiel. My last name is Backus. I dropped my son off at the airport this morning and he sent him to college. And my wife kind of teased me a little bit on the way home. She goes, "You gave him a hug and asked him what." I said, "What's your last name?" And he said, "Backus." And I go, "Go and make us proud." And how many know that Grandpa Tom would want that same thing for us, huh? His last name is McNiel. How many know every day from now on, we represent him, huh? We represent him in the ways that we live. So we should give every effort to make him proud because we represent him. And eating dinner, preparing for this, I want to recount one story for Ben. He told a story of a day when there was a storm and he was with his dad and the storm was approaching. And how many know that a great picture is all about perspective, correct? So it's getting in the correct position to take that great photo, right? So he saw a tower and determined to climb that tower in the middle of a fierce storm so that he could get a picture, that perfect picture. And he climbed up and he got that picture, didn't he, Uncle Ben? He climbed up and he got that picture. But then this is the part of the story that I love. When he came down, he said, "Ben, don't you dare tell your mom what I just did." And I think it's funny because Ben's recollection of that story was my dad was fearless. My dad was fearless. He climbed that tower to get that perfect picture. And Ben told that story, and Sandy and Bob and I, and we all sat and listened to that story. And I just want you to know that's the theme that I kind of took from all of this listening is, our story. Our story, who we are, is incredibly important. You know, and we're writing a story, whether we're young or old, we're writing a story every day. Who we are, what we believe in, our priorities, our commitment to our family, right? We're writing a story. And I'm so glad to be a part of the McNiels and to be a part of that story. And then I don't know if you noticed, but we were teasing before the service, so we have, the McNeils have people that are good with video, the McNeils have people who can sing, the McNeils have people who have beautiful photography, we have a couple of authors here that are McNeils. You know, all of these talents that are all showcased in this service are all a celebration of the McNeils. And so thank you for your participation in that, and hopefully we're paying a great tribute and giving great honor to Grandpa Tom. And so with that, I'd just like to give a couple of details just to remind you. How many know that we all have a story that we could tell, don't we? So you're going to have opportunity. We're going to go out to Andrew and Catherine's house, and we're going to have a reception there. There are maps in the back near the book where you signed in, and you could take a map. That'll help you get out there. And so you can tell your story there over some refreshments and different things like that. How many also saw some beautiful little plants with cards? Those are shamrocks and different things for you to take home so that you could plant those at your house and that you could have a memory from today. And then also, we just want to let everyone know there isn't a graveside service. That this is kind of the conclusion of that portion. And so just so that everyone's aware of that. But we would love everyone to come and be a part of that reception, enjoy some good food, some friends, and some family and some fellowship all together to where we could tell a story. Tell a story. To say the impact that Thomas had on us. So with that, I'd like everyone, if everyone would just stand with me, we're going to close by, I'm going to recite the Lord's Prayer. It's in Matthew chapter 6, verses 9 through 13, and it says this: Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Thank you again for coming. And I really do. I look forward to hearing some great stories at the reception. And so on behalf of the McNiel family, thank you again for coming and participating. I appreciate it so much.